All right, let's get started. Happy Monday morning. Appreciate everybody joining. This is the Connected Leadership webinar series sponsored by Sunstone HR. We'd like to invite everyone to use the chat feature. I will be watching the chat as we go, but a little bit of some upcoming webinars. We've got Stephanie today. We've got Lance and Jason coming up the next couple of months. You can follow Sunstone HR on most of the social media platforms, and all of these webinars are saved and recorded for your convenience. So you can find all of these on YouTube following our meeting. And with that note, I probably should click on record, right? Actually, it is recording. Okay, hold on for just one second. I apologize. I've got all these wonderful slideshows set up, but the one that I built for, let me find my introduction one here. Here we go. Bear with me. I ran into some slideshow technical stuff, of course, right as we started this. Okay, so again, welcome to our Connected Leadership webinar. Just a couple of housekeeping things before I get started. Make sure your microphones are muted. We'll let Stephanie complete her presentation. If you have comments, questions you'd like to ask, put them in the chat. I'll be watching and monitoring those as we go, and we'll have a Q&A period at the end. We will take time at the end for Q&A, so you can drop if you don't have questions or you can stick around. We do record these things. If you'd like to see the prior sessions or you miss a future session, you can look at the Sunstone HR uh, page that we've got. Our presenter today is Stephanie. I've worked with Stephanie now for a year-ish or more, so we've known each other for quite a while, and she's a member of the Sunstone HR team. So let me tell you a little bit about her. She has over 17 years of HR leadership experience. She's built and led HR functions ranging from high-growth startups to global enterprises like Backstage, Cast and Crew, Curaleaf, Credit One Bank. Her expertise spans merger integrations across 20 countries, remote team leadership, and developing talent strategies that fuel employee engagement and business growth in industries including tech, cannabis, entertainment, and financial services. So let me turn the time over to Stephanie. I'm going to stop sharing, but welcome Stephanie for our presentation today.
Thank you, Rod. I appreciate that. Let me share my screen. We tested this out. It worked earlier, so let's make sure it still does. Okay. Can everyone see that? Thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you for having me. Again, yes, my name is Stephanie Trindade, not as Rod Lacey as it says down at the bottom. I am over 17 years of HR experience. As Rod had noted, multiple different industries and private and public companies, small startups, also large corporations. Also, prior to being in human resources, I was also in the criminal justice field. So I worked with at-risk youth for quite a few years. And so how to have a tough conversation is something that's pretty common for me in my role. And so I just wanted to kind of help people kind of give yourself somewhat of a framework on how to have a tough conversation. A lot of people try to avoid them because they're uncomfortable, they're not sure what to say. So we just want to kind of help people navigate those conversations, especially as a leader that is part of your role. So I just kind of want to provide the tools necessary. So let's get started. So here's kind of the agenda. Why tough conversations matter. Why is it important to have them? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about common mistakes that I see that get made that can be avoided. A simple framework to remember the four P's to help you navigate a difficult conversation. Handling emotions in the moment is also something that's incredibly important when you're having tough conversations. And then just kind of wrapping everything up that we discuss. So, again, why tough conversations matter. Every leader faces difficult conversations, whether it's about performance, behavior, boundaries, feedback, and ignoring these problems will cost more than addressing them. So, in a Gallup poll, employees who don't receive feedback are 30% more likely to disengage, meaning they're not going to give 100%, they're not going to go above and beyond, they're not, they're just showing up doing the bare minimum. So, how some of these small issues can grow into larger ones when they're not handled early. I have an example that's actually one that happened to me in my HR role. I had started at an organization, and a manager came to me and said, I want to fire this employee. And most likely, HR is going to ask you, what type of documentation do you have with regards to that? This individual said, I don't have any. Said, okay, well, what conversations have you had with this employee? And what was their responses? Oh, I haven't talked to them about it yet. Said, okay, well, how long has this been happening? Oh, 2 years. I said, okay, that's a very long time to have an attendance issue go on without it being addressed. And I said, do you say anything to this individual? They say, well, here and there. I say, it would be nice if you could show up on time, things like that. I said, well, at this point, it's become more of a manager issue than an employee issue, a leadership issue, because this wasn't addressed. And so, because of that, it's now morphed into the employee thinks it's okay, and it was an expectation. So, it should have been addressed right away at the beginning. So, I told the manager, I said, this is what we're going to need. We're going to need to start fresh. The 2 years before don't matter at this point because it should have been addressed right away. So, we need to start fresh. Moving forward, have this conversation with the employee, reset expectations, note the attendance policy in the handbook. Also have a conversation, you know, which, typically early you have these conversations to prevent any sort of escalation. Um, Maintaining trust at the same time with your workforce and keeping the team aligned is also important when you have these early conversations. But you want to address them right away, and it doesn't need to come at them in an attacking way. It's just, hey, what's going on? I noticed you're not on time. This is a requirement of the role. When you're not on time, these things happen, right? If you get it early enough, it can typically be course corrected. But if it goes on a year or two, then it becomes an issue that, for the employee, they think it's okay. No, no news is good news, right? They're continuously late. It's okay. And this manager struggled with these type of conversations. It wasn't an easy conversation for them to have. They didn't know what to say, how to say it, when to bring it up. So that's part of why I wanted to have, this kind of training because difficult conversations aren't always about conflict. They're just about clarity. Let's reset expectations. Let's make this clear. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Let me see if I understand what you're trying to say. So, a lot of common mistakes that I see that leaders make is waiting too long to address the issue. As I noted, a year or two is too long. I would say within a week, ensure that that conversation's addressed. And being really vague instead of being direct. It sure would be great if you'd be on time, if you could show up. Like, that's not addressing the issue at hand. That's talking around it. Um, Also, not specific to that issue, I've had managers want to just change policies in general, just so they could avoid having that conversation with an employee. Saying, well, why don't we just change the PTO policy instead, this employee is violating it or abusing it instead of addressing that, then they just want to change the whole policy for everyone. So it's really important to be direct, talk to the point to that person that this is an issue that I'm seeing with you. That is incredibly important. Not getting emotional or defensive. Sometimes it can be difficult, but as a professional, we do have to kind of check ourselves in those moments, and that's going to be part of kind of the framework here. In making it personal, it's not about you. Now we're talking about their behavior, things that we're seeing. They're tardy, they're late. Why is that? Let's talk about that instead of it making it about you and how you're upset and these type of things. Yes, you can say that, this is an expectation, this is a requirement. But again, let's not make this personal or an attack on them and their personality. So bring the facts to a difficult conversations, not feelings, is important to remember. When things are not addressed, as we kind of touched on before, trust erodes. Small issues become big issues. As we noted, one employee was late. They've been late for a while. And we did find that other employees started becoming late to meetings or just not showing up because there were no consequences to that. So small issues can become big issues. Team morale drops. Well, you always let this employee be late. How come I can't? Or why is it a big deal if I'm late and you address it with me, but not the other person? So team morale, they start to lose credibility and trust in you as a leader. And you lose credibility all around. Avoidance doesn't protect relationships, it delays growth. Okay. So, to kind of jump into the simple framework, we have the 4 Ps as a way to remember this, a simple method to kind of guide through every tough conversation. And we'll go through each one of these in a little bit more detail. Um, One, prepare. That's probably the most important one is prepare. Know your goal, bring the facts, and know the outcome that you want from that conversation. And to be perfectly honest, this can be used in your own personal life as well. We all have difficult conversations we need to have with family members or spouses or what have you, and this framework can be helpful for that too. So if you are not a leader and you want to be one, or you don't have anyone reporting into you, this framework can still be utilized in a day-to-day. So prepare. Also, when it comes time to present, be direct, be calm, and be respectful. View it as being professional going into that conversation. Pause, listen to fully understand. This is a two-way street, right? And then plan, agree on next steps, and then follow up is also incredibly important. So the goal isn't to win here. The goal is to how can we move forward in a positive way. So the first P is prepare that we had talked about. So define the purpose. What outcome do you want? Why are you having this conversation? What is important to you? We'll use the example as the leader who has an employee who's always late. The goal is you want them to be on time. You want them to show up at meetings, not be 10 minutes late, not just completely avoid the meetings altogether. Gather the facts. What I mean by that is come to them with dates and times. You, on these 3 meetings, you were 10 minutes late. Here's an example and the context around it, why it's important this individual should be on time. Oh, because you delayed this meeting, it pushed this back. Or because you weren't fully informed, I had some other manager or some other employee handle this situation and they weren't, completely up to speed. So that takes more time to have that conversation with them. And so time costs money, right? The more individuals need to kind of intervene and interfere in a situation that could be pretty simple if you were just on time, it costs the company money and it costs time and it costs you yourself as a leader frustration. Also, when you're preparing, you're bringing the facts, which is fine. You can have like a Word doc, something very simple. Just put a date and say, on this date, this employee was late, and address it. Say, hey, you weren't on time. What happened? What was their response? Right? Bring the examples and the facts, but then also anticipate their reactions and questions. You know these employees, you've worked with them for a bit. Prepare and go into it. Maybe they're defensive, maybe they get emotional. How are you going to handle that? You probably know what questions they're going to ask. Well, where does it say that in the policy that I have to? Be prepared with the policy, right? Come prepared and choose the right time and setting. Don't just slap 15 minutes on their calendar and be like, hey, I gotta go. I gotta get to another meeting. Give it the appropriate respect and time, whether it's a 30-minute, an hour conversation, whatever you need, depending upon the scenario, and be respectful and give that your full undivided attention. Don't be responding to messages on the side or, responding to text messages. Be in the moment, be respectful. So choose appropriate time and setting that you will be able to have this conversation. Preparation builds confidence and reduces emotion. So you're going to have all these things at your fingertips. You're prepared to go into that conversation. And again, the same thing can be used in your own personal life. You talk about some sort of scenario where you're upset, bring the facts and examples and the context and why it's an issue for you and what outcome you want out of it. Anticipate their reaction and their response, and choose an appropriate time to have that conversation. The next step in the 4 Ps is present. So when you are actually having this conversation with them, be clear and specific about what happened, right? Again, based on facts. This is the scenario, this was the date. The meeting started at this time, you showed up at this time, you interrupted the meeting, we had to repeat ourselves to catch you up, blame, not, I'm sorry, not blame, give the facts as to what's happening and why it's an issue. So focus on the behaviors of this individual, not their personality. Don't attack them as a person. You're always this or you're always that, and you're loud or whatever it may be, right? Focus on the actual issue at hand and not attacking them as a person. So, an example provided here is I've noticed deadlines have been missed recently, and I'd like to talk to you about what's getting in the way of that. A lot of times, as a leader, you can say, how can I help you with that? What can I do? Is there a roadblock that I can remove for you that might be an issue? And it's a good opportunity. Maybe there's for the being late, maybe there's a daycare issue, maybe, whatever it may be, at least you're in the know of what's going on and have that conversation, and maybe you can try and work something out. Or maybe the employee's like, yeah, it's been happening for a couple weeks, but I got it handled. It won't happen again. I apologize. And as much as we want employees to come to us with these things as a leader, you can't expect that. You do need to go to them and address these issues. Yes, the employee should. I have an attendance issue, I have a problem, I have a daycare issue, whatever it may be. They should come to you. But you can't rely upon that. You, as the leader, do have to address an issue when it comes up. Along those lines, keep the tone calm and collaborative. Again, we're not going to attack, we're not pointing fingers, we're not doing this blame game, the he said, she said. It's, I've noticed there's an issue. Help me understand what's going on. And use very neutral language. The next is pause and listen. And this is probably one of the most difficult ones for leaders to have. It's just stop and listen to what they have to say. So give space for their perspective. You laid out your facts, you presented the scenario, the situation, what your frustration was. Now let them speak. Use active listening. Active listening is paraphrasing, nodding, clarifying, things like that. Avoiding interrupting or rushing to fix it. If you're in a conversation with someone and you're immediately trying to figure out what you're going to say next, or, oh, that person shared this story and I want to make sure I share this one, and you're not active listening. Active listening is hearing what they say, pausing, take a moment, and rephrase it. Let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So you're saying you are struggling to be on time because of this particular daycare issue. Am I understanding that correctly, right? And it's okay to just pause in that conversation and have a little bit of silence. Listen to understand, not to respond. I think a lot of people feel like they have to fill the void of silence. Sometimes it's necessary. I've experienced that with employees where I'll say my piece and they'll say, they'll be talking and then there's a moment of silence. And it kind of gives them this opportunity to say something else. And so then they start divulging more information and more things come out because I'm not trying to talk over them and I'm not trying to get to this resolution right away. I want to understand what's happening. And so you just stop and listen, which can be very difficult because, silence can feel uncomfortable, but it can also be very powerful in a conversation to make sure that both parties are being heard, especially with clarifying and paraphrasing is helpful because then that individual knows, okay, they did hear what I said. They did hear my perspective. It doesn't mean you agree with it. It means you understand it and you heard it. And then the last P is planning for next steps. So going into this conversation, you wanted an outcome. So how are we going to get there? Summarize agreements and action items. Re-paraphrase or, go over what you talked about. We talked about X, Y, and Z. And moving forward, I need to see A, B, and C. And how are we going to do that? Whatever conversation you had with that individual, lay out the facts. Clarify the next steps and timelines. Okay, we have our next meeting on this date. I expect you to be on time. Maybe it's a project that they're working on and there's timelines. I'll check in with you every week to make sure that there's nothing getting in the way of achieving this goal. You, as the leader, need to be proactive about these things. You're setting these expectations, so you do need to follow up. Also, thank them for their time and engaging in the conversation. They could have been very defensive, but instead it was your approach. Maybe they're like, yeah, I hear what you're saying. And they engaged and had that dialogue with you. It's going to be your approach. If you're coming at it with an attitude and you're upset and frustrated, you're going to get that back. So you want to make sure that you're leaving that open for them to share more with you so you have a better understanding of what's happening so you can course correct it. Always, always, always follow up with quick written summary and do check-ins. So at the end of that conversation, shoot them an email and say, I just want to recap everything that we've said. Here's the, ABC that we discussed, the written agreements, here are the dates, and make sure that everyone's on the same page. So you have it in writing. And then at the bottom, just say, please confirm this is accurate. So they respond back. You have in writing that they understood what the conversation was about, what was agreed to, and future action items. Because going forward, then if they don't meet those, they can't say, oh, I didn't know or I didn't understand. No, you have that in writing that they do understand. They did know and they did agree to this. And that's what was discussed. You also have it as a paper trail. So if it happens again, you have that as a backup for you. Documentation is key in having these tough conversations. It's a very, very important. Because whether or not you have that tough conversation and it goes positively where the behavior changes, great. That was the outcome you wanted. But if the employee gets defensive and they don't agree with what you're saying or they get upset, you have that paper trail to provide evidence like maybe this isn't working out and we need to move on from this individual. So you already have that in place. So documentation not only provides protection, but also clarity on the next steps and how to move forward. So handling emotions in the moment is key to having these tough conversations. We've all been in them where you feel yourself getting worked up, you get frustrated. It's super important to stay calm and manage your own reactions first. Um, like I said, it can be easy. I'm not a 100% of this myself either, but you have to go into, especially in a professional mindset, knowing that this isn't about you. This isn't about me. And not to make it personal, right? So it's important when you're handling these emotions in the moment, you yourself check yourself first, right? Lower your tone, keep it at an even keel pace. If emotions are running high, you have every right to say, let's pause, revisit this, and when we can both think clearly, or maybe, there's a better time for us to have this conversation if they're getting upset. And ask questions, stay curious, don't be defensive about these things. This isn't about you. Remember, this is having a conversation with them to figure out what's going on. I'll give an example. Years and years and years ago, I worked in retail and I was a store manager. And usually around the holiday season, people can get pretty fired up and they have a lot of emotions themselves and experienced customers getting upset over little things, not having a particular item or in a right size. And it can be pretty chaotic and busy. And when you're managing a store, you have so many fitting rooms that you're going to utilize, and you have to have someone monitoring those, at least at the location I was at. And so we couldn't open other ones. We didn't have anyone monitoring them. And some lady became incredibly upset, and I can't wait in this line. This is taking too long, etc. I said, I'm very sorry. It's a busy time of year. She got super upset with me, threw clothes in my face, and told me I hate this store. I'm never shopping here again. I was like, okay, I'm so sorry to hear that. You're more than welcome to shop online then, if that's, a frustration for you. In the moment, I was at a 10. I was upset. I mean, someone just threw something in my face, right? But I also at that same paused and I was like, I know this isn't about me. I know this lady is not that upset over a fitting room on a super busy shopping day. It was like a Saturday. Like, I know that's not what you're really upset about. There was something else going on in her life, and we don't know, right? She could have been getting a divorce. She could have heard some bad health news. She could have had just a bad day, and I was someone she took it out on. Now, is it okay? Absolutely not. That's completely disrespectful and uncalled for, and she did leave. But I use that as example as to kind of stop and pause and think these heightened emotions that people have, they're not about you typically. It's usually about something else going on. And so sometimes it's helpful to kind of approach it in a different way and say, hey, what's happening here? How can I help you? And when you approach it that way, you get a lot more information. People open up, they share what's happening. They're not required to, but it gives you more of an understanding of why are you late every day? Like, I don't understand what's getting in the way here. And giving them that kind of ability to speak without an attacking tone or being defensive or disrespectful. Because I have seen that from managers. And those conversations always go south. You're never going to get anything out of it that you're hoping for. So, also, you should be modeling the behavior that you want to see from them, right? Lead by example is the common phrase. So if you want them to be respectful and have a lower tone and a pace, you need to show that first, as you should anyway as a professional. But it can be really difficult sometimes when you're in a certain situation and emotions can just take you away. So kind of a wrap up and takeaways here. The 4Ps framework is prepare, come with the facts, data, information, present it in a way that is not attacking them, being very calm, professional. Pause in the conversation. Silence is okay. It's also important to hear their side of it, paraphrase, clarify so you understand what's happening. And then plan ahead and plan what are we going to do next? What are next steps? And include them in that process. Don't just dictate. Just say, this is the outcome I need. How can we get there? What can we do to achieve this goal, right? Include them in the planning process. You get their buy-in. It's much more likely that individual is going to participate in that. So key reminders, kind of through everything that we talked about, preparation builds confidence and reduces emotions. Okay, so prepare. Use neutral language. Silence can feel uncomfortable, but it can be really powerful sometimes. You just leave silence there in the room, and sometimes the most amazing information that you needed comes out or you wanted to come out. Again, same thing in your personal life. If you're having a tough conversation with someone, it's okay to just be quiet and be silent. Um, and documentation in more of the workforce provides protection and clarity, not only for you as the manager, for the company, but also clarifying for the employee as well. And then model the behavior that you want to see from them. So remember that tough conversations don't necessarily get easier, but you just get better at handling them. And so it's important to kind of use this framework going into those in any kind of difficult workforce conversation versus avoidance. Avoidance is not going to help you. It can be uncomfortable. I hear a lot of managers say, no, I didn't know what to say or how to say it, and I didn't know how to approach it. Human resources is there for you to help you with these conversations. Not everyone knows how to do it or is the greatest at it, but you can do it. Everyone can do it. And this is helpful if you kind of have a framework and preparation going in. So, with all of that being said, does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, please feel free to throw your questions in the chat. I've got one for you, if I
Sure.
can, if that's it. So just to get the thought process started, and I'll admit this topic is my Achilles heel. This is my weakness. I fear these conversations, but I would agree with you. The more I'm prepared, the better they go. They never get easier though. It's still a challenge for me. But one of the things that occurred to me as you were presenting is sometimes the reaction of the person you're having that difficult conversation with might make for a different meeting. So how do you negotiate? Is it a different meeting if someone is very agreeable and supportive versus confrontational? How do you negotiate those two forums?
Yeah, I mean, if they're agreeable, typically that's an employee who maybe didn't recognize that there's an issue. If you have an employee where like, hey, this is a problem. Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. I'm so sorry. That's something I know I need to work on. Sometimes you get those employees. That's great. That's not always necessarily the case. Usually someone's defensive or sometimes they're scared and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't, am I in trouble, right? That type of stuff. But you do get your defensive, angry, frustrated, and they'll throw out, well, somebody else did it. And so how come, well, we're talking about you right now. We're not talking about somebody else. That'll be addressed at a different time. right? And kind of circling back and bringing it back. It can reach a point, and this is actually sometimes more powerful, where you just end the conversation and say, clearly, you're not in a place to have this professional, respectful conversation, so we'll circle back at a different time. And that sometimes can shock them. Like, you're just going to hang up on me, or you're just going to walk out and leave the room. Yes, you're being disrespectful. So this ends here, and we'll, address it later. And then if it happens again, right, then it becomes a behavioral issue that would probably need to be disciplined in that kind of capacity. But it really, yeah, depends on how they show up as to, it's talking them kind of off a ledge a little bit when they reach that heightened level of just upset and anger. And that's sometimes where the silence and the pause can be helpful. I mean, like, okay, sometimes the words that they say, if it falls flat and there's no response, they like, oh, I really just said that out loud. And then we'll say, hey, okay, so circling back to the issue at hand, let's address this from a different way. So help me understand what's going on. Instead of, this is frustrating, this is upsetting to me, and you come at them in that kind of way, you're going to get pushback. It's all about your approach. And if you're already upset, that's the other part of it. If you're already upset, then don't go into that conversation. You need to be calm, and you need to kind of assess the facts and then schedule something. Don't do it right away.
Okay, I don't see any other. I have one more question, if I
Sure.
can. So I apologize. So where this has been a challenge for me. This is again, this is something that I don't enjoy doing. I love your thoughts about being prepared makes for a better presentation. So if I'm terrified about this, what might preparation look like for me that where if I'm weak at this, I'm not good at it. What might that preparation be?
Yeah, if for like the example of being tardy. So a Word doc, put the examples of when they're late, how many times you've talked to them. Again, all these situations could be different. If you can pull up an email, I sent you an email on this date. You and I spoke on a one-on-one on this date. We talked about this in your performance review. Um, we brought this up on this call. So there's 4 or 5 different instances that this has come up, and give an example. And sometimes what can be helpful, and I also encourage managers to do this a lot when we're kind of preparing for the documentation, is if you're utilizing Slack, right? If you have Slack conversations, you can screenshot those and say, see, here's an example of what I'm talking about, or screenshot the email and put it in a Word doc. Typically, chronological is helpful. So you can look back and be like, oh, yeah, it happened on this date. And you have that already ready and prepared. So usually for managers, if you have an employee that is kind of causing some issues or frustrating you, the first step that I would say is just start like a chronological Word document. Nothing super formal, nothing fancy, just a way for you to remember. And even if it's something that happened like 2 months ago and you remembered it, go ahead and put it in that document. It doesn't have to be from like this day forward. If it was a performance review, like, hey, we just did it 2 months ago and we talked about this from that point forward. Here are all the different examples that I'm talking about. And don't go into that conversation without having that, because they're going to ask you, oh, yeah, well, when? Well, what do you mean? How did I say that? And they can get an attitude about it. And if you don't come with the facts and come with the evidence, it's going to look poorly on you. So, you as a manager, just doing something simple like that will help you prepare, and also explaining the outcome of what can happen, meaning when you're late, here's the domino effect that happens, and how it impacts other people, and how it impacts the business, or whatever situation may be, whether it's customer service or whatever their role is, right? Here's the additional impact that that may have. And to explain that to them, even for your own self, say, when I have to deal with these things, then I'm not able to get to A, B, and C. And so then that holds up my day. And so it's a domino effect with not only me, but also your coworkers, probably your subordinates as well, however the situation is, and explain how it impacts. It's being transparent. And I think that's a lot of what's missing, is the full transparency. Obviously, you don't need to be attacking and disrespectful and all that, but just kind of explain why it's an issue, how it can end up, and then kind of mirroring that. Like, I'm sure you wouldn't appreciate that if one of your subordinates did the same thing, right? And that can help them frame it in a different perspective.
That's perfect. Are there other
Anyone
questions from?
else? I mean,
And
even
then
if you
another,
have like a situation where you're like, I don't know how to handle this, maybe we can talk through it. If there's something that anyone wants to share, I'm open to that as well. Or if you just want to reach out, not in a group setting and just one-on-one, you're more than welcome to do that too.
well, let's do this. Let's wrap up for now. I think that
Okay.
we've got again good recording. My favorite quote from the whole thing I put in the chat was avoidance doesn't protect relationships, it delays growth. I love that. I think we do need to be committed to our employees in these situations. But thank you, Stephanie, so much for
Yes,
your
thank you for the time.
contributions here, and thanks everybody for attending. This recording will be on YouTube shortly. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Let's
everyone.
have a great day. See you.
Bye.